Will the BRICS nations dethrone the US dollar? So the question is, will the BRICS nations dethrone the US dollar? Well, before we get into that and try to answer that, let's just cut to a recent Real Vision interview with Simon Mikhailovich.
Eventually, there's no question about that, because all reserve currencies eventually have been replaced. And I don't think that it's going to be any different in this situation. The question is, what does that mean, dethroned? Does that mean that the US dollar is going to disappear somehow and there's not going to be a US dollar? Or does it mean that there will be trading zones, the world will break out into trading zones where US dollar will be dominant reserve currency in some of the trading areas, but not in others? And I think that that's kind of probably more likely. I mean, I don't think the dollar will be dethroned as a reserve currency. It will just become a reserve currency as opposed to the reserve currency. And the implications of that could be huge, because the ability of the United States to borrow and finance cheaply its deficits or its spending has been directly tied to its status as the reserve currency. Now, we already see developments. I mean, the fact that the United States has imposed these freezes, asset freezes, and frankly, Canadian government imposed that on the truckers. So, I mean, the whole idea that money in Western banks can be frozen without due process for because of political disagreements or political reasons, that's a huge flag for a lot of nations and people that they need to find potentially other alternatives. The fact that Saudi Arabia is discussing selling oil to China for yuan, that Russia has instituted, pay rubles for gas, all of these are challenges to the US dollar or a replacement. So if demand for US dollar reserve currency on the margin decreases, not disappears, on the margin decreases, that means ultimately that the borrowing costs and the cost of capital in the United States will increase. That's what it means. And ability to spend more than we make will also become more expensive and more difficult. And given what I've been talking to this audience for many years about what I believe are unsustainable financial arrangements that we have now with massive leverage and zero interest rates or near zero interest rates, although they've risen a little bit, it's just the numbers to me don't add up. Because when rates go up, when the cost of funds go up, whether that's because the Fed is doing it, or whether that's because the market is doing it, or whether that's because of the loss of confidence of the people around the world and in the United States, all of that makes it impossible to continue business as usual. And so if the business continues not as usual, but in some other way, that will have tremendous implications. Because the way we got here is by spending more than we make. And so if we start spending as much as we make, and we make less, potentially because of these other issues, then that introduces very dangerous dimensions, because that usually in history has spilled into political disturbances and social unrest. I think what we are watching here is the introduction of gold and commodities back into the financial discussion. It's being done by Russia. In the moment when Russian ruble collapsed in February, after Russia started the military operations, Russian government has implemented several interesting developments or several interesting tactics that have stabilized the rubles. And those included backing temporarily ruble with gold de facto by offering to buy gold for a stated amount of rubles. So essentially put the floor underneath the ruble. And then next, demanding payment for a natural commodity in rubles. And that's a problem with having a situation where we, the United States, dictate what currency people have to accept. But if somebody says, well, I have a precious commodity that everybody needs, but I'm only going to sell it for this. So what do you want to do? You don't want to buy it? That's fine. Starve. And I think we're observing this right now in Europe. Furthermore, Russia right now is developing, I mean, they've announced that they're developing an alternative financial and currency system with a neutral, as they call it, reserve currency that will be pegged to a commodity and gold basket. Now, neutral meaning it's not like the United States dollars. It's not a currency of a country. It's just I guess it's sort of like a free market gold standard, if you will, or a commodity gold standard, in the sense that the basket fluctuates in price and everybody else is pegged to that basket. So that would dramatically change the balance from the finance-driven economies to real resource-driven economies, real economy-driven economies. And that's where the reshoring and the reindustrialization of the United States becomes a strategic imperative. So yes, I see the challenge to the US dollar coming from something like what the Russians, not necessarily from the ruble and yuan, but from this arrangement whereby resource trade in that part of the world would be pegged to a tangible basket of commodities and gold.
And Ben has shared this article from Business Insider where he says Russia and China are developing a new commodities-backed reserve currency with other BRICS nations, more valuable than IMF, SDRs backed by air. I couldn't agree more. And we've now got the Bank for International Settlements warning that leading economies are at risk of falling into a high inflation trap. Augustin Carstens, the BIS General Manager, said the key for central banks is to act quickly and decisively before inflation becomes entrenched. Do you think they'll do it? Or do you think they're too late? And Sven Enrich makes a good point here. The economy is led by a Fed that self-admittedly doesn't understand inflation, knows rate hikes won't solve energy and food inflation, but doesn't see a recession even if they raise rates to 4%. I'm sure we're completely safe.
I think we now understand better how little we understand about inflation.
That's not very reassuring.
No, honestly, this was unpredicted. I was looking at our at the time of our June meeting 1 year ago. Of the 35 people who file with a survey of professional forecasters, 34 of them had inflation below 4% for last year.
And coming in from Gold Telegraph, Federal Reserve Powell says no guarantee of soft landing for US economy. Says the global economy has entered a new world when it comes to inflation. No soft landing? A new world? You don't say. And the Shell CEO says seeing an ever tighter oil and gas market, upward pressure on oil prices for time to come. Just as I've argued that this decade is going to be an inflationary decade led by high energy costs. And China and Russia are two of the largest gold producers as well as two of the largest gold hoarders. The West better pray gold is a worthless relic. And this is after the announcement of sanctions on Russian gold. And from Professor Werner, he says the new multi-year high of the Russian ruble, markets choose resource backing with almost no national debt over flimsier alternatives. And from Luke Groman, the solution to cutting Russian energy revenues is simple: slash energy usage. The problem is Western governments allowed their balance sheets to get to the point that slashing energy usage, aka inducing a severe recession, will collapse the financial system. So, yeah, the West, the G7 versus the BRICS. And this is from RT, so take that as you will. The details of the agreement have not been revealed. However, according to the story, the US suggested lifting sanctions on insurance for ships that transport Russian oil only if countries agreed to buy it at a settled maximum price, thus enforcing a price cap. G7 member states also rejected the idea of a worldwide price cap on oil prices proposed by the French president. The proposal was reportedly waived by the US and Germany, and France had agreed to withdraw it. Tom says it's pretty clear we have reached peak clown world when the G7 has to reject the idea of a worldwide price cap on oil as going too far. And he just says these people are so pathetic. And from the Conservative Treehouse, this article, and I'll put a link in the description below, we won't go through it, but global energy cleaving continues. Iran and Argentina apply to join BRICS economic partnership. Jim Rickard says, I've always said adversaries could not destroy the dollar, only the US could do that itself, or to itself. It has taken Joe Biden to make that forecast come true. Argentina and Iran are now joining the BRICS new currency initiative. And I'll put this article in the description below. You guys can read the Zero Hedge article, G7 and the desperation stage of Russian sanctions. I'll also put this article in the description below. And Ben tweets, Iran and Argentina apply for BRICS membership. Another nail in the global dollar standard. Now, you know, I hate being so critical of the West. I really hate being critical of Australia, the UK, Canada, you know, Europe, and the United States. You know, I'm proud of the country that I come from. I'm proud of Western civilization and all the values that we've been built upon. But the West, as they say, as the saying goes, go woke, go broke. And we've just fundamentally gone down this very Marxist, Malthusian route. And, you know, it's got to be called out for what it is. And this tweet from Mr. Zhao, who I believe is the foreign minister, or a very senior member of the CCP, is basically trolling here. It says, so next time when they talk about international society, you know what they mean. And there's the G7 population, 777 million, BRICS, 3.2 million, and with Argentina and Iran joining, and who else? You know, Saudi Arabia, other Middle Eastern countries going to join them. What about Africa? Any other South American countries? There's definitely a bifurcation happening. Do I think that the BRICS are going to replace US dollar as the global reserve currency? Not necessarily. As others have said, there could be, and even Jerome Powell himself has admitted that the US dollar most likely won't be the sole reserve currency, that it will be a reserve currency. You know, however, if the BRICS nations back it by a basket of commodities, or just back it by gold, won't the rest of the globe prefer that over a fiat currency that can just get created out of thin air, that has no backing other than the faith in the populace? So we're living in interesting times, that's for sure. I've done videos before where I don't believe China will be the next global superpower for many reasons. I won't go into that again. However, I'll put a link in the description below to that video. So this is the video that I did, and actually in the comments it was quite divisive. There was a few disagreements on this video, so I'll put a link in the description below. But do I think the US as the sole reserve currency, global reserve currency, is coming to an end? Yes, I do. When's that going to happen? I don't know. Many smarter people than me, like Felix Zulauf and Jeff Gunlock, says by the end of this decade. Stan Druckenmiller by 2035. Really, it could happen any time between now and then. Anyway, what do you guys think? Love to see your thoughts and opinions in the comments below. If you like this video, please hit that like button. Always appreciate it, guys. Take care, and I'll see you all again on another episode of Finance Uncut.